The 9800X3D is hands down the best CPU for Tarkov right now, and it's not even close. Out of the box, the performance is already incredible, but there are still ways to squeeze a bit more out of it. Late last year, AMD added something called X3D Turbo Mode to X670 and 870 boards that includes the E variants, promising improved gaming performance with just a BIOS toggle. So naturally, I had to test it, right? So I ran my 9800X3D to see if enabling Turbo Mode actually makes a difference in Tarkov. If you're wondering the same thing, stick around to see the results. But before we jump into it, if you'll do me a quick favor, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. We're more than halfway to our goal of 25,000 subs, and every single one gets us closer. If you find these deep dive tuning videos helpful, that's the best way to support the channel. Alright, we got that out of the way now, let's get into it. X3D Turbo Mode is kind of like AMD's Hyper RX in Adrenalin for AMD GPUs. It's a one-click toggle that loads a pre-optimized gaming BIOS profile. Gigabyte was the first to roll it out, but at this point, pretty much every major board manufacturer has added their own version. Officially, it's described as quote-unquote unifying core distribution, memory bandwidth, and power tuning to push the boundaries of gaming performance. But let me translate what that really means. Basically, it disables SMT, and on dual CCD chips, it turns off the non-X3D CCD so that all active cores have access to the 3D cache. Now, in terms of power tuning, that part's a bit vague. I checked PPT and TDP before and after enabling turbo mode, and as far as I can tell, they stay exactly the same. So if anyone knows what specific power tweaks are happening behind the scenes, feel free to drop it in the comments below. And even if you're not on an X670 or an X870 board, you can still replicate turbo mode manually. You just disable SMT and BIOS, and if you're on a dual CCD chip, just turn off that second CCD. This configuration is ideal for most games, and today we're going to see if it's worth running in Escape from Tarkov. For this test, I was running my Ryzen 7 9800X3D tuned with the plus 200 MHz boost clock override and a minus 40 undervolt to get the most out of the chip. It's paired with 64 GB of DDR5 at 6000 sealed 30 with tightened secondary and tertiary timings. If you want all the tuning details on the system, check out the link in the upper right hand corner. Storage is handled by a Gen 5 Aorus 10K M2, and everything is running on a Gigabyte X670E Aorus Extreme motherboard. The 5070 Ti is an MSI Shadow 3X overclock model. As for the game settings, I use my Pure 80 optimized preset, which is my high texture preset for the best visual to FPS ratio. If you want to see a full breakdown on those settings, check out the video in the upper right hand corner. Each test was run 3 times per resolution, 1080, 1440, and 4K. First offline to get baseline numbers without server and network variables, and then online in live raids. I then took those averages and compared those numbers. So now that we understand what turbo mode is, let's see the results of the testing. Starting with Streets offline, the average FPS was actually lower with turbo mode on. It was at 158 versus 165 with turbo mode off. That's about a 4% decrease. On the other hand though, the lows told a different story. 1% lows jumped from 125 to 135 and 0.1% lows from 111 to 122. So even though the top end dipped slightly, the frame pacing felt smoother overall. In Streets Online, the average FPS stayed nearly identical, 133 versus 134, basically within margin of error, but the lows improved again. 1% lows were up about 5% from 96 to 101 and 0.1% lows from 82 to 91, which is a solid 10% gain. On Customs Offline, turbo mode had a slightly lower average FPS again, 245 versus 248, but it's basically a negligible difference. The 1% lows, however, climbed from 176 to 186, and 0.1% lows jumped from 137 to 159. That's a pretty massive 16% gain there, just from changing one setting. That's the kind of uplift that decreases microstutters and makes gunfights feel snappier. And finally, in Customs Online, this was the cleanest win for turbo mode. Average FPS was the same at 224, but lows were consistently better. 1% lows rose from 145 to 160, and 0.1% lows from 119 to 131. Another 10% improvement in the bottom 0.1%. This really helps smooth out those dips when you move into different areas with a lot of assets, or when new AI is loading in. So given all this, should you enable X3D turbo mode on your X3D chip? When it comes to the average FPS, the difference is basically a wash. With turbo mode, the average FPS was either the same or slightly lower usually, but never meaningfully so. It's all well within the margin of error for a game like Tarkov that already has a ton of RNG. The real takeaway here is in the lows. Across every test, 1% lows improved by about 5 to 10%, and 0.1% lows were up by about 10 to 15%. That translates directly into better frame pacing, and that means smoother, more consistent gameplay. Even though gameplay with turbo mode off was already solid, turning it on helped eliminate those little dips that happen when you're moving through different areas that can throw off the field during fights or when you're turning quickly. So yeah, for Tarkov, I'd say it's worth flipping that switch, absolutely. And that's going to do it for this one, guys. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below or join my Discord. We have over 1,400 knowledgeable and friendly members now, and I'd love for you to be a part of the community. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.